Hi, you're watching GearWire.com. I'm Owen O'Malley, and we are at 65 Amps in North Hollywood with Dan Boul.
Hello, guys. Welcome to North Hollywood, California. We're glad to have you here. I think we're going to have a look around the shop today, maybe see how we do things, and hopefully have a little fun.
We were talking a little bit about what the sort of workflow of what an amp looks like when it comes into the shop until it leaves.
Absolutely. Well, behind you is our parts bin, and that's where they all start. And when we get sort of the basic of the amplifier built, this is where we start. And we go to a lot of pains inside of these amplifiers to make them sort of roadworthy and reliable, not to mention sound good, but it's also a large investment, so we think we owe our customers the respect of making it correctly. So we do a lot of things in here that are pretty extraordinary. But like I was telling you earlier, my business partner Peter and I had a lot of experience playing on the road. And we just kind of know what fails in amplifiers over time, so we try to eliminate that. And a lot of flame-proof, wire-wound, silicoated components that will keep the amp stable and alive on the road. They're very tight tolerances. You're going to see 1% tolerant resistors in there, which means they are what they say they are. If it's a lot of amps are made with 10 to 20% tolerance parts, so if it's a 100K resistor, it might be 90K, it might be 110K. So you can imagine as you go through dozens of parts through a circuit how far off your amp can be at the end. This way we keep it the same. We use low ESR electrolytics that are made for us so this amp can deliver a lot of electricity to you fastly. Fastly? That's not a word. Rapidly.
That works. That works.
Rapidly. And so it makes for a better experience in your hands when you're playing guitar. The amp seems to work with you a lot more than you have to work with it. Even on our coupling capacitors, our manufacturer helps us define the polarity on it so that the signal path is always going in the path of least resistance, which makes for a nice experience when you're playing guitar. In the tone path, we use nothing but actual Allen Bradley carbon comp resistors. These are the best sounding resistors ever made. The only problem with them is they haven't been made for 25 years. So I have several 100,000 of these here. So I can make amps for a few decades like this. Everywhere outside of the tone path, we're back to the silicone coated 1% tolerance metal film resistor. So it's just tight as a drum everywhere inside the amp. We use 0.09 aircraft aluminum, which is very, very high-grade aluminum, and it makes our grounding schemes a lot simpler and work better. Everything that's touched by a human, we overbuild. So you see 1,000-volt sealed switches here. It's double the rating that you'll see in most amplifiers. It's double the rating necessary. And we do that on purpose because through experience, we've learned that anything that a person touches will break. So we have to overdo it. And then, last but not least, of course, we have all of our amps have custom-made mercury magnetics transformers on them. These are the 800-pound gorilla in the transformer world. The steel is very low silicon content. They're made with the correct kind of steel, the correct gauge of copper wire, the highest grade of copper wire. They're hand-wound, so you can do very complex weaves on them. All that translates to is more vocabulary. I give you the technical jargon, which will bore everyone to death. But what that means as a guitar player is that you've got a lot more options at the end of your fingertips. You're going to have 10 different clean sounds. You're going to have 10 different distortion sounds. You're going to have the ability to absorb pedals better, all those sorts of things. So we kind of do everything that we think is really, really important for making the good experience for the end user. Peter's been on the road since 1978, I think, and I started on the road in 1981. So, we know this from experience. It's not a guess. We're sort of guitar players trying to do this. Even down to our tube sockets are made out of Michael X. They just will not catch on fire. So when a tube arcs, the amp's not going to blow up. Those sorts of things are very important because guys make their living with these. And it's very important when you're out on the road to be able to count on these things. So if you want to move on, we can take you through the rest of the shop and show you what happens.
Actually, real quick, you told me before why you do the silicone-coated wiring as opposed to what most companies do.
Well, without saying any names, you look at 99% of amplifiers made today. In the power section, they use little white concrete resistors. They're very low tolerance, which means, if they're 100K, they might be 85K, they might be 115K, but they actually catch on fire. So I've had many gigs where I've looked at the back of my amp and went, oh my God, there's flame shooting out the back of it. That's not the tube doing that, that's those grid resistors doing that. And so we put silicone-coated wire wound, that's hard to say, silicone-coated wire wound, flame-proof resistors.
3 more times.
Sells seashells down at the seashore. But it keeps, the amp's not going to catch on fire. It's a nice feature, I think. Yeah. It's a flame-proof amp. Yeah. So we try not to. We don't want them to burn.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
because tubes are what they are. You can't control tubes. You know, tubes are like light bulbs. They'll work perfectly for 20 years and then pop. Yeah. Or they'll work perfect for 20 minutes and then pop. Right, so you have to be prepared for that. Cool. Yeah. And then so let's see. Once we get a completed amp, it comes over here to the desk of death, where we'll bring it up slowly with current and make sure there's no miswires. We'll put tubes in it, run a tone generator into it, run it into a scope, and if it's working right, it'll become apparent on the scope immediately. We can see what's going on. Assuming that it does work right, and 99% of our amps do, our builder's fantastic. Then what we do is we take it over to our burn rack, where we run signal into it, and we try to burn these. We try to burn these for at least 48 hours. So,
continuously?
Yeah, it's abusive burn-in. We're putting way more strain on this amp than a guitar will ever imagine. Right. So what I want is I want this amp to fail here if it's going to fail. Right. So if there's any part or there's any solder joint or there's any tube especially that's going to fail, it's going to happen here. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And you know, tubes especially are just wildly unpredictable these days. So we have a CD that's running in here that's it's a CD that came from NASA. It's wild frequency oscillations. It's what they use to stress test their equipment.
Oh, wow.
And so we figure, you know, if these amps can survive this test.
Is there any way we could hear that CD, or would that just damage us?
I don't have any speakers are hooked up right now, but I can show you in my office. I have it on iTunes as a backup copy. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's horrendous sounding. I used to run this when we very first started 65. We did it in the little house behind my house. And I used to burn in amps, you know, like a little pool house kind of thing, about as big as that carpet. And we'd burn in amps out there, and I have to take the sofa cushions off and stick it all around the amplifiers because my wife had to wake up having nightmares at 2 in the morning. What's that? It's an alien invasion. But, yeah.
Just testing.
As you can see, we put big load resistors on. They're hanging out here in the air because they get hot otherwise. And we just beat the daylights out of these. Then we put them back on the bench. You know, it's our secondary bench here. We put them back on the bench. And if it's still making a nice waveform and doing, you know, we have a matrix of tests we run on every amp. So it should do this at this setting and this at that setting just to make them consistent. If it's doing that, then we go over here to room number 2.